Would you like and subscribe? I'd like and subscribe me so hard.
I've been there. I see my hopes and dreams are lying on the ground. I see the sky just begin to fall. He said, all things pass into the night.
No! No!
What did you see, Clarice? What did you see?
Lambs. They were screaming. They were screaming.
Hello, nieces and nephews, and welcome back to The Vault for episode 13, My Dinner with Hannibal, as we look back together to the 1991 thriller and Best Picture Oscar winner, The Silence of the Lambs. For this unique episode, we'll be doing a dinner and a movie combo along with our special guest, the man himself, Dr. Hannibal, the Cannibal Lecter. Dr. Lecter, welcome to The Vault.
Good morning.
Now, for those at home watching, I'll explain. Dr. Lecter is on the other side of a protective glass. The producers insisted on it for insurance purposes. I'm sure that won't impede, though, on the intimacy of our dinner date. Will it, Doctor?
People will say we're in love.
Shucks. Well, to start off, I brought your favorite bottle of Chianti.
How very thoughtful.
It's a 2023 nice dry red from Tuscany. Would you like to see?
Closer, please. Closer. That expires in 1 week.
Huh? Oh, you mean the bread? Oh, yeah, it's fresh. Oh, and the main course we have is a lamb chops with a side of fava beans. Ah.
They were slaughtering the spring lambs.
They were. Smells good. Yeah?
You use Evian skin cream. And sometimes you wear lead at home. But not today.
Damn. That's pretty good, Doctor. And it's a little bit creepy. I'll put the lotion in the basket. Oh, do you want your plate of lamb chops?
You send that through now.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. Bon appetit. The film opens in Quantico, Virginia, where we are introduced to Clarice Starling, an agent in training at the FBI Academy. She is summoned to Jack Crawford's office, the chief of behavioral science. There, Starling is given an assignment to visit Dr. Hannibal Lecter at an asylum for the criminally insane in Baltimore. Lecter, also known as Hannibal the Cannibal, is a brilliant psychiatrist and an extremely dangerous serial killer. Crawford believes Lecter can help with the investigation to apprehend Buffalo Bill, a serial killer who is on the loose, kidnapping heavy women, killing them, and then skinning the bodies. Lecter has clammed up on other agents, but Crawford hopes the ambitious, smart young Starling might appeal to him. Upon entering the asylum, Starling is hit on by the smarmy Dr. Frederick Chilton, director of the institution. He escorts her down to the deepest bowels of the asylum, where the most dangerous psychotic criminals are kept. She is warned about keeping away from the glass which encloses Lecter.
On the afternoon of July 8, 1981, he complained of chest pains and was taken to the dispensary. His mouthpiece and restraints were removed for an EKG. When the nurse leaned over him, he did this to her. His pulse never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue.
At the end of a stone hallway, Lecter stands within his cell, politely greeting Starling.
Good morning.
Although initially pleasant and courteous, Lecter grows impatient with Starling's attempts at dissecting him and viciously rebuffs her.
Oh, Agent Starling, you think you can dissect me with this blunt little tool?
No, I thought that your knowledge...
You're so ambitious, aren't you?
As Starling departs, another patient, multiple MIGs, flings his ejaculate onto her face, enraging Lecter. He calls Starling back and offers a riddle containing information about a former patient of his. The solving of the riddle leads Starling to a storage lot where she discovers the severed head of a man in a jar. She returns to Lecter, who tells her that the man is Benjamin Raspill and that he is linked to Buffalo Bill, his first victim. Lecter then offers to help profile Buffalo Bill if he is transferred to a facility far from the noxious Dr. Chilton. Lecter also demands a quid pro quo from Starling. He wishes to ask her personal questions about her childhood growing up in rural Tennessee, probing her psychologically in exchange for clues to Buffalo Bill's identity. Meanwhile, Buffalo Bill takes another victim, this time abducting Catherine Martin, who happens to be the daughter of a U.S. senator. As the cat and mouse game continues between Lecter and Starling, the truly terrifying pathology of Buffalo Bill begins to take shape. This raises the stakes as the clock on poor Catherine's life is ticking away. Based on the 1988 novel by Thomas Harris, The Silence of the Lambs would mark the second book to feature Hannibal Lecter as a character in the author's oeuvre. Lecter first appearing as a supporting character in Harris's previous book, Red Dragon, published in 1981. Red Dragon, about FBI profiler Will Graham hunting for serial killer Francis Dollarhide, aka the Tooth Fairy, introduced Lecter in a similar capacity, as a criminally insane prisoner whom Will Graham originally caught and now seeks help from in profiling the Tooth Fairy. A film adaptation of Red Dragon would be made and released in 1986 under the title Manhunter by director Michael Mann. In that film adaptation, a young Brian Cox plays the good Dr. Lecter. Cox's interpretation is more subtle but not as frightening. Manhunter is still a solid thriller and may be a treat for fans of the show Succession out there to see Cox as Lecter, even if his screen time is brief. After the success of the book Red Dragon, Thomas Harris said he wanted to create a lead female character for his next novel.
After Red Dragon, I wanted to try to do a woman investigator, and I met some terrific ones at Quantico.
Introducing Clarice Starling, Harris said he named the character after the starling bird, which is a small but highly gregarious species of bird which he saw flocks of around the Washington, D.C. area. When the book The Silence of the Lambs was still in galley form, Orion Pictures decided to snatch up the rights to adapt it into a motion picture. Orion originally partnered up with star Gene Hackman to produce the film. Hackman was also planning to direct the picture and possibly play FBI behavioral scientist chief Jack Crawford. Producer of Manhunter, Dino De Laurentiis, though, still owned the film rights to the Hannibal Lecter character. But apparently, since Manhunter was not a box office hit, only finding its cult status much later, De Laurentiis lent Orion the Lecter character for free. I'm sure he came to regret that one in time. Screenwriter and playwright Ted Talley was next brought on board to adapt the book into a screenplay. Talley recalled being only a third of the way through the script, having yet to be paid, when he got the news that Hackman dropped out of the project. It's been implied that Hackman may have left due to his involvement with Mississippi Burning, another dark and violent story concerning the FBI. Now that Hackman was out, director Jonathan Demme stepped in. Demme agreed to come aboard even before the screenplay was finished, having read Harris's novel. Early in his career, Demme broke into feature films while working for exploitation film producer Roger Corman. His first directorial projects being movies like Caged Heat 1974 and Crazy Mama 1975. Demme's film Melvin and Howard 1980 would get noticed by the critics, and he would go on to direct movies like Swing Shift 1984, the screwball action romantic comedy Something Wild in 1986, and the New York Mafia comedy Married to the Mob in 1988, starring Michelle Pfeiffer. When it came time to cast the picture, Demme offered the role of Clarice Starling first to Michelle Pfeiffer, having just worked with her. Pfeiffer considered it, but ultimately backed off later, saying she got cold feet about the gruesome subject matter. Next, Demme offered it to then America's sweetheart Meg Ryan, but she also turned it down for the same reasons as Pfeiffer. Laura Dern was also considered, but the studio felt she just wasn't a big enough name at the time to star in the picture. Jodie Foster, meanwhile, had been petitioning Demme for the role the whole time. She wanted to portray Starling ever since reading the novel. Demme just wasn't sure if Foster would be right for the role. Jodie Foster was freshly coming off her Oscar win for Best Leading Actress in the movie The Accused, so the part ultimately went to her. For most people, the character of Clarice Starling will forever be associated with Jodie Foster's portrayal. Foster possesses a tough yet accessible quality, having been familiar to movie audiences since she was a child actor, especially in films like Taxi Driver, Freaky Friday, and Bugsy Malone. Starling's character is introduced climbing her way up a steep hill on a rope at the Quantico obstacle course. Also, being of diminutive height at 5'3", the visual of Foster as Starling getting onto an elevator surrounded by a bunch of male cadets who tower over her in the opening sequence visually establishes her position within a male-dominated field of federal law enforcement. The Silence of the Lambs being one of the first and few depictions of a female cop on screen at the time allowed Demme to depict a female main character's point of view. She's often dealing with leering glances and looks of suspicion or resentment from men. Starling is often required to politely rebuff come-ons and flirtations from these men while doing her investigation, something Peter Falk's Columbo never had to deal with.
You go out for cheeseburgers and beer? The amusing house wine?
Are you hitting on me, Doctor?
Yes.
It's this gendered placement, especially as a green trainee, which makes her vulnerable. As she's about to face off with two of the most dangerous serial killers, Starling must rely on her strength of character, wits, and resourcefulness. In preparation for the film, Jodie Foster worked with a young female FBI special agent in her 20s named Marianne Krause. Krause, like the fictional Starling, had a mild but noticeable Southern accent and affectionately was nicknamed Grits at the Bureau. Krause had been a special agent for just 3 years, and she and Foster were around the same age. She instructed Foster in FBI culture, chain of command, conduct, protocols, dress, and interviewing technique before the filming began. When Lecter demands a quid pro quo, Starling shares with him her childhood memories in Tennessee as the daughter of a single father, a local sheriff who died in the line of duty when she was young. Being orphaned, she was first sent to live with a rancher and his wife. She eventually confesses to a memory she had there of hearing the slaughtering of the spring lambs and being compelled to try to save at least one of the baby lambs from slaughter.
What became of your lamb, Clarice?
I killed him.
You still wake up sometimes, don't you? You wake up in the dark. and hear the screaming of the lambs.
Clarice's character's stakes are not only to prove herself as an FBI agent, but most importantly, to be the one to save poor Catherine from Buffalo Bill. In this way, Starling can be seen as a feminist archetype within the classic hero's journey. She is the one who must save the princess from the dungeon labyrinth of the Minotaur. As a hero, though, she's not Wonder Woman, she's human and vulnerable, but it's the arc of overcoming these obstacles to save another woman's life that makes Starling so compelling, even to Hannibal Lecter.
I loved her strength and her character, and I mean that in the largest way, in terms of the things that make her who she is, the unconscious things that she doesn't even know about, the things that draw her to her fate in some ways. I mean, I think she is a great American hero in some ways, and somebody who will, whose lot in life is to save innocent people and to come to terms with their own fears while at the same time.
The inspiration behind the creation of Dr. Hannibal Lecter is, as you would imagine, an interesting one. Thomas Harris has said that back in the 1960s, while he was working as a journalist, he traveled to Mexico to interview an American mental patient who was being detained in Nuevo State Prison in Monterrey. While there, the inmate he was there to interview had tried to escape and had been shot by a prison guard in the legs. The inmate was treated by a skilled prison doctor, whom Harris met and had referred to as Dr. Salazar. Harris described him as a small, lithe man with dark red hair, who stood very still, with a certain elegance about him. A prison guard later informed Harris that Dr. Salazar was in fact a convicted murderer and inmate who could package his victim in a surprisingly small box. This meeting inspired Harris to create a character with a peculiar understanding of the criminal mind. Another inspiration for Lecter was a psychotic serial killer named Albert Fish. Fish was a cannibal, among many other nasty things. He was also known as the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Brooklyn Vampire, and the Boogeyman. Fish was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison in New York in 1936. When casting Dr. Lecter, many of the top Hollywood actors were considered, including Robert De Niro, Sean Connery, Al Pacino, Robert Duvall, Dustin Hoffman, and Jack Nicholson. Across the pond, they considered Derek Jacobi and Daniel Day-Lewis, but the actor who Jonathan Demme wanted most was Anthony Hopkins, who he had seen play the kind Dr. Frederick Treves in David Lynch's film The Elephant Man. Demme flew to London to meet with Hopkins, who, at this time, returned to primarily acting in the theater after being in several movie flops. Hopkins was somewhat perplexed as to why his performance as the empathetic doctor in The Elephant Man would inspire Demme to cast him as Lecter. Demme told Hopkins it was that gentlemanly quality of a good man trapped inside the brain of a psychopath that he was interested in exploring. Being a brilliant yet insane psychiatrist gives Lecter a refined, educated demeanor with a keen perception that belies an underlying dangerous psychopathy and propensity for extreme violence. He's like a cat watching you, never blinking, but ready to pounce if it weren't for the security glass separation.
Jonathan, how would you like to be seen? How would you like to be lying on the bed or sitting on a chair, writing or drawing or reading? I said, I'd like to be seen standing upright at attention in the middle of the cell. First time we see him, the audience will see him, or Jodie Foster will see him. Her first point of view is of him looking straight back at her. Now that is terrifying in my consciousness. So I wanted them to see very nice, charming, erudite, smiling.
The pathology of Dr. Lecter is one of both power and intimacy. Lecter likes to dissect his victims, both psychologically and physically. When he psychologically probes Clarice Starling, it's the most intimate he'll ever be with her, punctuated by that brief moment at the final meeting when he caresses her finger through the bars. The act of cannibalism, consuming another human being, is the ultimate act of intimacy. Literally devouring that person gives you complete power over them.
When you've got that glass between you, There's something peculiarly powerful and attractive about power, erotically attractive about power. And I think that's what Hannibal Lecter has. He has power.
For the role of Jack Crawford, Chief of Behavioral Science at the FBI, actor Scott Glenn was cast. Crawford first appeared in Harris's novel Red Dragon. He returns with a more pivotal role as a mentor figure to Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs. Scott Glenn, in preparation for the role, was brought into the FBI's inner world by real-life counterpart to Jack Crawford, John Douglas, who worked in the Bureau Science Unit in 1977, where he taught hostage negotiation and applied criminal psychology at the FBI Academy in Quantico. Scott Glenn said he was given an audio tape by FBI agent John Douglas as a form of research for his character. The audio tape was of two serial killers who had recorded themselves raping and torturing a 16-year-old girl. The content of this tape preyed upon Glenn's mind all throughout filming, and he refused to return to the role in the sequel, Hannibal, because he didn't want to place himself in such a mindset ever again.
Believe me, you don't want Hannibal Lecter inside your head.
To this day, he says that the tapes still cause him anxiety and bad dreams. For the role of Catherine Martin, the daughter of a U.S. Senator who was kidnapped by Buffalo Bill and intended to be his next victim, young actress Brooke Smith landed the part. Not only was the role physically demanding, requiring Smith to gain 25 pounds for the role and to spend most of her screen time at the bottom of a well, but it was also emotionally draining. As the only victim we in the audience get to know, the demand for authenticity in performance was paramount, considering the character was the only representation on screen of a person who has fallen victim to such a monster. Director Jonathan Demme was sensitive in guiding her through such a demanding performance.
They're pretty extreme circumstances, so it was hard for me to really relate to. I think he just wanted to make sure that I could get to where he wanted me to get to emotionally.
Other supporting cast included veteran actress Diane Baker as U.S. Senator Ruth Martin, the smarmy administrator of the asylum where Lecter is imprisoned, Dr. Frederick Chilton, who somehow manages to be more unlikable than the two serial killers, was played by Anthony Heald. The rest of the cast being filled out with character actor regulars of Jonathan Demme films, including Tracy Walter, Charles Napier, Paul Lazar, and Demme's old boss and mentor, producer-director Roger Corman, as the director of the FBI. There is even a blink and you'll miss him cameo from writer-director and father of the modern zombie film, George A. Romero. Now, for the role of the main antagonist, James Gumb, aka Buffalo Bill, many actors auditioned for the role, but the only one who truly frightened Jonathan Demme and the casting team during his read in the room was character actor Ted Levine. Buffalo Bill's MO is to target and lure in young women of a plus-size body type by pretending to be injured, then incapacitating them with a surprise attack. He takes them to his basement lair and keeps them prisoner at the bottom of a well for 3 days, or until they starve enough for their skin to loosen.
Okay, 3 days. Then he shoots them, skins them, and dumps them. Each body in a different river.
Do you know why he's called Buffalo Bill? Please tell me. The newspapers won't say.
Well, it started as a bad joke in Kansas City homicide. They said, this one likes to skin his humps.
The reference of the name is to Buffalo Bill Cody, who would tour the country around the turn of the century in Wild West shows. He used to claim that he once scalped a Cheyenne warrior. The crimes and pathology of the character are an amalgamation of a few different true-life serial killers. Author Thomas Harris based Bill's method of employing the ruse of wearing a cast on his arm and struggling to get something into a van as a way to lure in his young female victims from prolific serial killer Ted Bundy. The diabolical Bundy would often exploit the empathy of his victims by waiting for them to offer help before attacking and killing them. Another element of Bill's MO comes from the serial killer Gary M. Heidnik, who kidnapped, tortured, and murdered women while holding them captive in a self-dug pit in his basement floor in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection in July of 1999. Another serial killer whom actor Ted Levine said he researched as preparation for the role was Jerry Brudos, who would kidnap and kill women for sexual pleasure. He would dismember some of his victims after murdering them and often kept some of the body parts. He would then dump the remains in the Willamette River in Oregon. But perhaps the most infamous serial killer the Buffalo Bill character is based on is Ed Gein. He was known as the Butcher of Plainfield, or the Plainfield Ghoul in Wisconsin. In The Silence of the Lambs, Bill murders women so he can remove the skin and use it to stitch together a flesh suit he's creating. He wishes to wear the suit made of women's skin in order to achieve a transformation of sorts. The real-life Ed Gein would skin the bodies of his female victims and use it to make furniture pieces like lampshades out of dried skin. He was also constructing a female skin suit to wear around the house. It is believed he was attempting to take on the identity of his dead mother, whom he had an unnaturally deep connection with. Besides killing women, Gein would also rob fresh graves to get the body parts. Ed Gein was the inspiration for author Robert Bloch when creating the character of Norman Bates when writing the book Psycho, later made into the classic film by director Alfred Hitchcock. Gein's unspeakable crimes were also an inspiration behind Leatherface in Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Two of her fingernails are broken off, and there's dirt or grit under them. It looks like she's tried to claw her way through something.
Ray, get pictures of her teeth. We'll fax them through missing persons.
Right.
Clarice Starling discovers that Buffalo Bill leaves a calling card down the throats of his victims.
She's got something in her throat.
A cocoon of the death's head hawk moth indigenous to Asia as a representation of his transformation. When The Silence of the Lambs was released, the film, specifically the character of Buffalo Bill, was fiercely protested by members of the LGBTQ community. Their rightful concern was the further demonization by Hollywood of members of the gay and transgender community. The trope of the killer homosexual transvestite or transsexual has been something that has been exploited for cheap thrills over the years, equating transgender or gay as evil to mainstream audiences. Films such as Brian De Palma's more violent homage to Psycho, Dressed to Kill, 1980, and the cult slasher film Sleepaway Camp, 1983, are examples of movies exploiting this trope. That said, director Jonathan Demme took the criticism to heart. It's probably no coincidence that his next film would be Philadelphia. As for the character of Buffalo Bill, actor Ted Levine described his intention with his portrayal very differently than how it was received by some.
He was scared about the gay thing too. And I said, don't worry, this is not a gay character. You don't want to beat that movie cliche over the head of the, the mincing homosexual. The stance I took was more one of an acutely homophobic heterosexual man doing that mocking thing.
Yes, you will, precious. You will get the hose.
I kind of took it that he was sort of imitating the way his mother might have talked to the poodle. By hearing that voice, in a sense, he's sort of talking to himself, his inner poodle, as it were. The other thing he's not a transvestite either, or a transsexual.
But he thinks he is. He tries to be. He's tried to be a lot of things, I expect.
The production for The Silence of the Lambs began on November 15, 1989. The production was given unprecedented access to film at the FBI Academy in Quantico, with some FBI staff members even appearing in small parts. The FBI had approved the script and were enthusiastic to let the production inside, feeling the movie would be a great recruitment tool for women to join the Bureau, which was greatly lacking at the time. The wide span of location settings called for in the script included Tennessee, Virginia, Ohio, Illinois, Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. But to keep the production more centralized within its modest $19 million budget, the producers wanted as few company moves as possible, so during scouting the production, found most of the needed locations in and around Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which looks like most of the Rust Belt. Some additional scenes were shot in neighboring West Virginia, and the final scene was shot in Bimini Airport in the Bahamas. The now demolished Gothic exterior of the Western Center near Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, served as the setting for Baltimore State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. But the stone subterranean corridor which holds Dr. Hannibal Lecter in the bowels of the institution was built as a set inside an old General Electric turbine plant. Production designer Christy Zia wanted to mimic the Gothic architectural elements from the exterior location when conceiving this basement cell block. The idea that Clarice keeps descending down and down into hell to meet Hannibal Lecter. In the book, Lecter's cell is described as bars with double netting on the inside. Jonathan Demme quickly realized that it wouldn't work on film, obscuring the actors' faces while speaking to each other. Christy Zia came up with the idea of the glass partition like you see in liquor stores. The concept of the glass not only allows for a more intimate scene visually between the eye lines of the actors, but also separates Lecter out from even the other maniacs on the cell block as being especially dangerous. Interiors for Lecter's diabolical escape were filmed at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall inside the museum's Graham Ballroom in Pittsburgh. When conceiving the cage set and resultant carnage from Lecter's escape, for this terrifying sequence, production designer Christy Zia was inspired by the works of Francis Bacon.
We went to a variety of sources, but largely I found that the works of Francis Bacon seemed to speak to me in some very strange way. The tones, the colors that he used seemed to be the kind of colors that we should have in our story. The resultant carnage that happens after Lecter escapes was directly inspired by Francis Bacon. I had explained to Jonathan that what we were going to see would not even be what really existed, but what you would see if you were in the mind of the man who opened the door first. Then Jonathan walked in with Ed Saxon and Kenny. He took one look at this and he walked out the door.
The exterior Buffalo Bill's house, which he has taken over after murdering former owner, the elderly Mrs. Lipman, is a real location at 8 Circle Street, Perryopolis, Pennsylvania. The upstairs interior was filmed at this location. Production designer Christy Zia has said that the set decoration for the upstairs was somewhat based on the police photographs taken inside serial killer Ed Gein's house. Gein's house was filthy, filled with garbage and pots and pans thrown everywhere. Amongst the filth, police found body parts of women in jars in the refrigerator and human skulls being used as bowls. The location of Buffalo Bill's house went on sale in August in 2015 and sat vacant for about a year until a new owner took it over and has since turned it into a museum for fans of the film. You can visit the house today. The downstairs was built entirely as a set on the same stage where Hannibal's cell corridor was built. Zia's approach to designing James Gumb's lair was as a manifestation of his psyche. As Starling enters James Gumb's world, she is entering the mind of Buffalo Bill. Zia designed the set in a circular shape so the camera, as Starling's POV, could glide from room to room. She would enter the room where the moths were kept, then his workshop. The well or pit was constructed around a hole in the second floor and looked down onto the first floor of the building. The crew was about 100 feet above actress Brooke Smith, who would enter at the bottom of the pit through a trapdoor in the floor. Then it would be covered up with dirt. The center of this labyrinth was James Gunn's bedroom, which Zia described as complete fantasy. Nazi iconography and memorabilia are also included in the set decoration here, adding another level of evil to Buffalo Bill's character, and possibly correlating Ed Gein's obsession with the fact that the Buchenwald concentration camp commandant Karl Otto Koch and his wife decorated their estate with lampshades made from the dried skin of Jewish Holocaust victims and ashtrays made from human bone. Next to Gunn's sewing machine, a mannequin with a tailored skin suit on it can briefly be seen. This was made by special effects team Carl Fullerton and Neil Martz from a body cast of a female model, then cut apart and restitched together to look like it was tailored from more than one victim. Fullerton and Martz were also responsible for creating the FBI photos of Buffalo Bill's victims, utilizing real models. Set decorator Karen O'Hara based the images off of real photographs she saw on the walls in the FBI offices at Quantico.
There was a big bulletin board with the cases going on.
And there are the pictures of real women who have been harmed in terrible ways.
I had sort of actually a physical feeling of sadness of how sad this was. But you know, when you're creating a movie, it's not real. So when we were doing our wall, sort of in honor of these women, we did not use real photographs. We recreated all those with Carl Fullerton.
The feedback that we got was, I really enjoyed all of the dummies that you made. These were not dummies or fabricated bodies. These were real actors and actresses in most cases.
To achieve these recreations, the women playing the dead victims were required to lay down nude in dirty water covered in leaves and dirt with special effects makeup applied.
From my studies in dissecting cadavers downstate medical school, one of the things I noticed was as soon as you remove the skin, you see fat. Sometimes this actually looks like yellow chicken fat, believe it or not, when you open up a body on some people. We had to come up with some kind of body fat, because these were heavy women, so as soon as you remove their skin, you'd see all this fat. And Vinnie Altamore was around, who's Italian, and he came up with, oh, pastini. So we boiled up some pastini and added some KY jelly, some yellow. That was body fat.
One of the most iconic visuals in the film is Hannibal Lecter's mask. Costume designer Colleen Atwood went through a lot of tests to find the right look, eventually settling on the fiberglass mask. The unfinished fiberglass had a raw leather or dried skin look, which Atwood liked, so it never received any additional paintwork. Hannibal Lecter only appears on screen for a total of 24 minutes within the film's 1 hour and 58-minute running time, yet his presence looms over the movie throughout. This is not only due to Anthony Hopkins' hypnotic performance, but also the way Jonathan Demme and cinematographer Tak Fujimoto decided to shoot the dialogue scenes between him and Jodie Foster. They knew the picture would hinge on the success of those scenes. One visual technique Demme often employs are shots where the actor is looking directly at the camera. Lecter's stare, especially in close-up, feels penetrating. On the big screen, the effect is tenfold. The visual language is intimate. Fujimoto's lighting in this scene gives Lecter a skull-like appearance. These straight-ahead shots are also intercut with close-ups where the actor is looking just off-screen as well, but it all blends together seamlessly. Fujimoto's lighting style for the picture is for the most part very naturalistic. The overcast skies of the Pittsburgh winter help give the film a muted tone. His only scenes of expressionist lighting punctuate the most surreal horror moments. After over 4 months of shooting, the production of The Silence of the Lambs reached its last day on the schedule. Thursday, March 1st, 1990, would end up being a marathon race against the clock to finish the picture. It would be a grueling 23 hours shooting the final confrontation between Starling and Buffalo Bill. The scene called for Starling to be in complete pitch darkness while Buffalo Bill watched her through his night vision goggles, ready to kill her. It's a terrifying finale which puts our hero into the lower depths of the beast's lair. To achieve this scene, cinematographer Tak Fujimoto lit it with a green gelled light. Since she was supposed to be in complete darkness, they needed to avoid casting any shadows. This required the light to come from the same direction as the camera. Jodie Foster's acting then completely sells the rest of the effect. It looks like she's in complete darkness. For post-production, Jonathan Demme brought on his usual editor, Craig McKay. While constructing the picture in the edit, Demme told McKay that he wanted to make sure that the audience would never get ahead of the picture. To maintain the level of suspense and shock in the story, the audience should never be able to predict what would happen next. This is exemplified in the sequence of Lecter's escape, but also the parallel cutting approach editor Craig McKay and Demme took to trick the audience when we believe Jack Crawford and the FBI SWAT team are about to raid James Gumb's house. We see the alarm bell ringing in the basement layer when someone above is ringing the bell. Then through intercutting, through two different locations, it is revealed Clarice Starling is at the door by herself as she unknowingly comes face to face with Buffalo Bill at Mrs. Lippman's house. It's a sequence that completely manipulates the audience with a twist, not through screenwriting, but solely through the construction of the editing.
A lot of times directors will just shoot something straight out and you have to take the pieces to extend time to make all of the events happen. Well, this was shot that way. So I had to, then I went back and of course I put it together in a parallel fashion. And it took me 3 days to cut it. I remember I was trying this piece and that piece, and it was pretty clear what it had to be, but it wasn't strong enough. And where do you break in, especially when they're shooting in a straight line? You have to get in and break up moments and then extend moments. And so at the end of 3 days, I'm sitting there and I've almost got it working and it's not working. And I don't know what to do. And I look up and across the room in one of the film bins is a piece of film. This sounds unbelievable, but I went over and I looked at that piece of film and it was a shot of Crawford that I needed to make the whole thing work.
There's no one here, Jack. Clarice.
And I put it in and that was it. So these things come to you in strange ways sometimes.
To write the music score for The Silence of the Lambs, Jonathan Demme brought on versatile and prolific Canadian film composer Howard Shore. Shore had cut his teeth scoring thrillers for the films of body horror master David Cronenberg. He also wrote the jazzy intro to Saturday Night Live, as well as the epic scores to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. For The Silence of the Lambs, Shore stayed away from typical horror scoring. There are no abrupt hits in the orchestra to emphasize jump scares or anything so cliché. Instead, Shore took an operatic approach, composing a moody and intense score that gives The Silence of the Lambs its appropriate somber tone. Demme and Shore discussed the music from the perspective of underscoring character emotion.
In the meetings with Jonathan, in the spotting of the film, he said that we could possibly look at the film through Starling's eyes. That led me to writing a very passionate, emotional score based on a Starling character. You can find perspectives of how to use music in film through the characters in the film.
With the picture locked and scoring complete, it was time for Orion Pictures to unleash The Silence of the Lambs on audiences. In an unusual move, the film was released on February 14, 1991, Valentine's Day. Apparently, it was indeed the ultimate date movie, as it shot right to #1 at the box office that opening weekend. And proving the picture had sustaining power, it remained at the #1 spot for the next 5 weeks. As excellent reviews and word of mouth spread, The Silence of the Lambs stayed in the top 10 at the box office for 3 months. The picture ultimately brought in a gross of $130 million in the US and close to $300 million worldwide. That was on a $19 million budget. But the box office receipts wouldn't be the only payoff for the movie. The Silence of the Lambs would also go on to earn 7 nominations at the Academy Awards, winning 5 Oscars in total. It swept all the top categories, including Ted Tally for Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actress Jodie Foster, Best Actor Anthony Hopkins, Best Director Jonathan Demme, and Best Picture for producers Ed Saxon, Kenneth Ut, and Ron Bozeman. The Silence of the Lambs remains the only horror movie in Oscar history to have won Best Picture.
What do you think Hannibal Lecter would say upon receiving this Oscar?
Well, if I hadn't received it, you'd all be in trouble.
With the immense success of the film, it would only be expected that a sequel would be on the horizon with the same dream team attached. Unfortunately, despite Orion's Pictures having 2 box office hits that won Best Picture at the Oscars 2 years in a row, being The Silence of the Lambs and the year before Kevin Costner's Dances with Wolves, those hits could not make up for the financial flops the studio had in recent years, and Orion went belly up in 1991. The Orion Film Library, including The Silence of the Lambs, was sold to MGM. That's when producer Dino De Laurentiis, remember him? Who still owned the film rights to the character of Hannibal Lecter, jumped at producing the sequel. When Thomas Harris released his follow-up novel, simply titled Hannibal, both Jodie Foster and director Jonathan Demme were not impressed with the direction Harris had taken the characters, especially Clarice Starling. Both Demme and Foster didn't like the third act resolution in the novel, feeling that it was a portrayal of the Starling character which had been established. So Demme and Foster decided not to return. Instead, Ridley Scott stepped into the director's chair with Julianne Moore taking over the Clarice Starling role. The only lead to return was Anthony Hopkins, who liked the finished film of Hannibal, but admitted something was lost in the character's frightening power after The Silence of the Lambs.
I think it's a good film. The reservation I have about that idea, though, is that when Lecter's let out of his cell and is walking the streets, he has no power. Because when he's confined in that cell, he's like a tarantula in a bottle. Once you take him out of the bottle, there's nothing frightening about him.
After Hannibal was released in 2001, the series would continue with a remake of Red Dragon in 2002, Hopkins returning for a brief appearance as Lecter. Then in 2007, the prequel film Hannibal Rising would be released based on Harris's 2006 Lecter origin story. Finally, the TV series Hannibal would run for 3 seasons on NBC from 2013 to 2015. But none of the subsequent films or TV shows have captured the atmosphere and tone of The Silence of the Lambs. Its lucky combination of being based on a great thriller novel with the perfect cast and a team of dedicated behind-the-camera artists, led by inspired director Jonathan Demme, just captured lightning in a bottle. It would also come to exemplify that smart, mainstream thriller the 90s and early 2000s became known for. But what is it about the film that keeps audiences coming back over 30 years later? Maybe it's the charismatic yet dangerous Hannibal Lecter, who topped the AFI's 100 Best Villains list at number 1, that makes the film so compelling. Or maybe the terror of The Silence of the Lambs is one that taps into something deeper and more primal.
A lot of people say they can't see scary movies, they feel disturbed by them. But they are entertaining, like Psycho, Rear Window, for example. I mean, Hitchcock, the master of all scary movies, said, when he was asked, why do we like to be frightened? He said, what's the first thing we see when we see a baby? We go, boo.
It's not a supernatural entity or a movie monster that frightens us in The Silence of the Lambs, but the very real human monster that does exist in our world. It explores the darkest part of human nature while juxtaposing it to real-life heroes like Clarice Starling, who hunt down such monsters into the forefront. But in the end, perhaps it is that potential for darkness that lurks within all of us that frightens us the most. For if only that terror were to stay on the movie screen.
I think what it is because you go into a darkened theatre with a bunch of other people, and you sit there and you give yourself a fright, and then at the end you come out into the sunlight with millions of other people, and you've just given yourself a little rehearsal for what terror really is, but you know that you're safe.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode looking back at The Silence of the Lambs. It's always nice to have an old friend for dinner. And to leave you on a high note, we here at The Vault will play you out with the final number from Silence, the musical. Yes, that is a real thing. Is everybody ready? She solved the case and saved the day. Let's give Clarice a great big hand. The lambs have finally stopped screaming. This is the silence of the lambs. She found her answers in a cell, and her salvation in a well. Brand new adventures now await her, like Contact, Panic Room, and Nell. This is the silence of the lambs. When did we get a monkey?